any step forward is progress. And yeah, really listen to your body. And if you're having a bad day, don't push through exercise. Just do gentle movement. And at the same time, if you're feeling bad, don't not move.
So, welcome to this episode of Finding Your Range podcast with me, Jeannie, a movement therapist who specialises in hypermobility, EDS and chronic pain. And today we've got a special podcast. We've got a panel, as you can see, more than one person today. We might have someone else joining us, so don't be surprised if someone else pops up soon as well. Today we're discussing the truth about EDS exercise. So we're going to try and get to the bottom of it. What works, what doesn't work, things you've been told, things that, didn't work out for you. So let's get started. And we're going to do that by just introducing the panel. So Robin, why don't you start and just tell us where you're based?
Sure. I'm based in San Francisco, as you might be able to tell from the Golden Gate Bridge in my background.
Yeah.
Of course, not real at the moment. I wish I had a view like this.
Yes, that would be nice.
Yeah. And I'm diagnosed with ehlers-danlos syndrome, hypermobile type. I was diagnosed when I was about 22, so maybe a decade ago.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And Rachel?
I'm based in Long Island, New York, and I was diagnosed with hypermobility spectrum disorder, HSD, and last year. So it took me about 5 years to get this diagnosis.
Yeah, great. And some of you may recognize Rachel, and if you don't recognize her, she did a podcast interview a few weeks ago where she explains her story in a lot more detail as well. So if you want to take a listen to that, you can as well. And then we have Bethany as well. You need to unmute yourself, Bethany. You're muted. That's it. There we go.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Trying to do this trying to do a mobile device, so it gets tricky.
Yeah.
So I'm Bethany. I'm based in the U.S. on the East Coast. I have hypermobile ehlers-danlos and was diagnosed with that actually this past March. Before that, we were going with a working diagnosis of hypermobility spectrum, which was given a year ago. So it's been a fairly recent journey for me.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And you might also recognize Bethany as well, because she was with us a few weeks ago as well. So if you want to listen to her story and journey, that's also available. And as I said, we might have another person joining us shortly. So don't worry if that happens. So everyone's here today, as I said, to discuss the truth about exercising and exercising with a connective tissue disorder. So let's kick off with Robin. I'm assuming that you're active now, but before your diagnosis, what was your life like? Were you active? Did you do lots of exercise? And what's it like since your diagnosis? Or did it change since your diagnosis?
That's a really good question. It was definitely in the process of changing before my diagnosis, which is what led to it. But I lived an extremely active life. I was a whitewater raft guide, a climber, a dancer, and in high school, a competitive runner. I was always very injury prone, and I didn't know that this wasn't normal. I just thought, of course I'm doing a lot of things,
Yes.
This is why this happens.
Yes.
And it wasn't until actually an injury, which I know is common for a lot of us, where, I started to develop chronic pain and fatigue and, all of the other symptoms that go along with EDS that led to my diagnosis after a period of prolonged inactivity. And from there, things just kind of went back downhill until I worked really hard at getting active again, which was I think, after each injury, harder and harder.
Yeah.
But it's definitely different now. I have to pace myself, but I still get out hiking, I kayak. I just started climbing again
Oh,
this
brilliant.
year.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and your
So
videos,
that's
a lot of the improvement. So I'm happy about it.
fantastic. So that's a positive then, we're getting back doing what we like to do, which is great. Thank you. Rachel, so how about you?
So yes, I was pretty active. Even as a young kid, I think at the age of 2 or 3, I had already started dancing around the house. I was always moving. I took ballet classes from 5 to 14, and I was very shy growing up. So that was the way I expressed myself, and I found a lot of joy in that. And besides ballet, I was very active. I did gardening. I liked running. I was always moving around, and nothing drastic happened that changed my activity levels. It was more of a progression.
Mm-hmm.
So since a young age, I would always be very tight and sore after exercise, but I just thought it was normal, or I was trying too hard.
Yes. Yeah.
And as it got worse and worse, then I had to slowly stop activity, and then my tissues deconditioned more, and then my exercise tolerance went down more. So it was like an endless negative feedback loop.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. It's very similar, isn't it? So you're both quite active, and then things just had to gradually stop, and then things obviously get worse when we stop doing stuff altogether. Yeah. And Bethany, how about you? What was your journey like?
So for me, I'd say I was fairly active in the sense that mother to several small children. I worked full time as a nurse and worked on the floor, so bedside nursing. And for me, it was also that gradual decline. You'd have an injury and then another injury, and then something else would happen. Where I really noticed the difference in symptoms was with pregnancy. So with each pregnancy, that was when I would get significantly worse. And then after my last one, that's when things really fell apart, and I realized that I couldn't continue at the same pace. So I've had to make a lot of just changes in life and in work and in family to try to accommodate for that, to learn to pace myself and to protect myself versus, my go-to is to push and do for everyone else and not me. So just trying to reshuffle and reshift that focus, that I have to prioritize myself so that I can provide care for others.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. So three of us, very, very similar stories, of being active and then having this sort of gradual decline. So, Bethany, if we stay with you, so it wasn't something specific that happened, was it? It was just a gradual, obviously you were working a lot, and then it was a gradual decline. How did your views change about exercise once, things started to sort of go downhill? Were you exercising at the time, or were you just working?
So I've been in and out of physical therapy for probably the last 8-9 years, because I knew that that's what I needed to help correct the problems.
Yes.
But the frustration was that it didn't always work, or that it sometimes would make things worse. And the physical therapist wouldn't really know what to do with me at that point.
Yeah. Is that because they didn't know about EDS?
So the majority of them didn't. It was actually my very last physical therapist who a few years ago was the one who said, "Hey, I think you might have this. You should talk to your doctor about ehlers-danlos." She was the one to finally notice that. But even she struggled with knowing exactly how to help me without hurting other things. So
Okay. Yeah. And so what about Robin? What about you? How did your views on exercise have to change? Because you were really active by the sounds of it, whitewater rafting and things. How did you have to change?
Well, I'll be honest, it was very hard for me, and I'm still learning on a daily basis, because I was diagnosed quite young, and I didn't accept it. And so I didn't change it. I just kept continuing with my exercise, I wasn't seeking a diagnosis at the time.
Right.
And so I barely believed it. I was like, I'll be fine. What's this thing?
Yes.
They
Yeah.
were exploring if I had Marfan's, and I was a little bit relieved that I didn't. And so I didn't take it very seriously, certainly not as much as I should have. And it wasn't until I was, approaching my 30s that I had a serious neck injury that resulted in some spinal instability that I didn't bounce back from as easily.
Right.
I was still tenacious after that and would just keep re-injuring my neck. I'm I'm coming across as extremely stubborn here, but and it was just 2 years ago that I really started paying attention. I had an ankle injury, which would be small, for many people.
Yeah.
Just a sprained ankle, but it took me out. I was on crutches for 8 months.
Wow.
It transitioned to use of a wheelchair because of how much orthostatic hypotension I had. My blood pressure would start to raise and drop because of how deconditioned my legs were getting, how slowly I was recovering from this injury. And similar to Bethany, I went through so many physical therapists who couldn't quite understand this paradoxical swelling and why the standard exercises were, hurting different parts of my body, until I found some really skilled EDS knowledgeable specialists who did PT.
Yes.
I improved, and I started to see a mental health therapist who focused on pain psychology. And that was what made a huge difference because she taught me about the boom and bust cycle.
Yes.
Yes. And that was really what made the difference. I realized that even with physical therapy, maybe I had to do 2 repetitions, not the standard 5 to 10.
Yes. Or even 30.
Yes, or even 30.
Don't do 30 of these. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah. So you were in the classic boom and bust that is very, very common for us, I think. Extremely common.
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And Rachel, what about you? How did your attitudes or your views on exercise have to change, or did they change?
So yeah, having a diagnosis changed everything for me in terms of my next steps. So I finally had a name. So I finally was like, wow, I have some proof of what's wrong. And so that was very validating. And at the same time, I had started, this was last year when I was 16, I'm 17 now. And I had started going back to ballet class and thinking, oh, this is before my diagnosis, right before, let me just start building strength again. And because of my diagnosis, I was scared of subluxing joints. And so I withdrew and I started looking for EDS PT to work on strengthening before going back. And that's when I found the Zebra Club and I started working with you. And that has helped a lot. But similar to Robin, the first year of my diagnosis, I didn't really change my attitude of it. I was like, I'm young. I felt invincible. I was like, I don't feel like I have it as bad, like the most serious EDS.
Yeah.
So, I can still do like the hardcore Pilates and all those workouts. And so that's what I did do after I started getting stronger. And as Jeannie knows, I had a bad coccyx injury, which I'm still struggling with now, but hopefully getting over.
Yeah.
And that's what really started. That was like a wake-up call for me. And that's when I first realized the nature of EDS and how you have to manage it. And you have to, similar to Robin said, you only can do 2 or 3 reps of things, not 10 or 20.
Yeah, absolutely. And, how does this feel now? So we stick with you, Rachel. How do you feel now that you've had to change? Because it can be quite a big transition, right? And I think this is what people struggle with, is this transition from being very active to maybe having to adjust their lifestyle and their, how did that make you feel? How do you feel now?
At the beginning, it was very hard at first because that's the first time I realized that I have limitations. And yeah, being a teenager, that's really hard to put your mind around. So for a while, I think I was very depressed. But I think I got used to the idea, and there is hope for people like us. It's just that we have to go a different way than we normally would, and be smarter and strategize more.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah. And Bethany, what about you? How did you feel when sort of you realized you were going to have to make changes? Oh, remember to unmute yourself. That's all right.
So yeah, I think for me, being that it was a several year journey, kind of realizing what was going on in my body, I think I went through all those kind of different stages that you do of like grief, where, at first you deny it and then you're angry because you can't do the things you wanted. And then you have to come to a place of acceptance and modification. And I agree with Rachel that it is hard and it is frustrating, but it is also good to know that there is hope, that we're not stuck with just a diagnosis and nothing to do about it, that there is treatments and exercises and things that we can do to help us get stronger.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important, for the people listening who might be struggling right now. I think it's so important that we get that message across. So thank you. It's really good to hear from people who are actually, living through it. And Robin, what about you? How did you feel, obviously, when you had to, make this change? How did you feel at the time? Remember to unmute yourself. That's all right. Happens all the time. Don't worry.
Yes, I felt very depressed. Like I said, in the beginning, I didn't accept it. And as soon as I did, and I wasn't able to keep up with activities in the way I wanted to, I felt subpar. And I'm a huge mental health advocate. I think that it's really important to talk about these things and understand, when are we doing more than we can do, but also when are we doing less that we can do, and kind of find that middle ground where we very, very gently continue to move forward a little bit every day.
Absolutely.
And since I adopted that, it's really improved my mental health. So, even on a day that I'm having more of a hard time or more pain, I, do like very gentle, non-strenuous movement, maybe go for a short walk if possible. And I always will feel then like, well, I'm still me. I'm still doing something, and maybe like I'll drive myself somewhere pretty. And so it does get easier over time once, for me, once I both accepted it, learned some adaptations, and then actually saw that with gentle daily movement and progress, I can become friends with my body again, and I can become, closer to how I used to be, if not exactly the same.
Exactly. Absolutely. So yeah, the message here is that, we do have to make changes. Most people do have to make changes, but that's not the end of the road. It's just that we have to do things differently to maybe other people or how we were doing things before. But everything, you can definitely be moving forward from there. That's not the end of the road by any means. So brilliant. Thank you. So Bethany, what were you told to exercise by your medical practitioners? And if so, what did they recommend when you first got your diagnosis? Did they say, oh, you need to exercise, off you go? What did they say?
So my physical therapists were definitely big into getting me to strengthen. There was a lot of that core stability stuff where they would tell me to tighten my core and tighten my glutes to try to support when I do a bridge. There was a lot of do this exercise for, 20 reps, and then go home and continue to do it. And for me, I'm a bit of a perfectionist and an overachiever. So they would tell me to do it and I would do it.
Yeah.
And that's where I ended up continuing to injure myself. So that they tried other things like aqua therapy and a couple other different types, but there was still that same struggle of never knowing what was appropriate for my body and what was helpful. My physical therapist would always say, well, let's try this new exercise, and if you hurt later, we'll know not to do that one again. And it was kind of this trial and error thing that we worked through.
Yeah.
And I did get stronger, but I also had other injuries, so it was kind of a double-edged sword.
Yes, it's finding that balance, isn't it? What works, like we talk about finding our baseline. What works that's not going to injure me? And then can I build from that without injuring myself? Just out of interest, hands up who thinks they're a perfectionist as well. I saw people nodding, and yeah, me too. So there you go, 4 out of 4. I think it's a very common trait in our community, that we do want to do things well. And yeah, like you say, if you're told to do 30 reps, you'll go and do 30 reps. Thank you. Yes, Robin?
I see that perfectionism a lot with people who, have had difficulties with their health, because our health and well-being is so important, that I can really empathize with that perfectionism, even if it's not that way in daily life for people. When your well-being depends on being able to do a physical therapy exercise or taking a certain medication, it's really this place of it's like, yeah, I'll try it. I'll do anything.
Yeah.
And so for me, learning to listen, not just to that inside voice that's like, yeah, I'll do anything to get healthy, like more, let's do this.
Yes.
Is listening to my physical body, which is a little bit wiser than this driving perfectionist voice, gotta get better for me personally.
Yes. And you just touched on something, actually, listening to your physical body. Is that something you've had to learn to do over the years then?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Would it just raise a hand if you agree? Is that listening element something we have to learn? Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? That sort of lack of, I guess, proprioceptive or interoception of ourselves. Again, I think very common. Interesting. And Robin, were you told to exercise as well by your medical practitioners, and what sort of things were you given to do?
Yes, the geneticist who diagnosed me set me up with physical therapy, and I was asked to do a lot of very specific kind of isometric work in the beginning, a lot of isolated movements to avoid injuries. That was okay in the beginning, but over time it led to kind of imbalances in how I moved. And I found that for myself, once I started working with really EDS aware practitioners, that it changed to a little bit of kind of whole body movement, fascia movement, release, in the same ways that come up in the Zebra Club. And so my exercise has adapted over time very much.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Yeah, hold on to that thought. And Rachel, you were also told to go and exercise, weren't you, when you were diagnosed?
Pretty much every doctor, chiropractor, massage therapist, they all told me you need to exercise and stretch, because if you're tight, then you should stretch. And my chiro would recommend weights for my arm pain, which was the most serious at that point. And lots of doctors recommend low impact sports like swimming. Some recommended walking an hour every day, which is very repetitive and would have caused a lot of pain. And I did eventually go to a PT who knew about EDS, and it was a lot of mechanical exercises. We weren't really aware of what was going on, and there was an emphasis on kind of making sure you keep up the pace of the exercise, like don't take so long to do each exercise. And I was dealing with my Coccyx injury at that time, so I eventually had to stop because we weren't really addressing that Coccyx injury. Instead, we were just focusing on like hip stability and core stability, and that was causing even more tightness.
Yeah.
So eventually I stopped and I started working with you. And in terms of doctor wise, I think like they're right in that we need exercise to keep up our muscle strength and joint
Yeah.
stability. But for me, my muscles would get so tight and I would end up getting injuries from exercising. So I didn't have a way to exercise in a way that would help me rather than harm me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like for people with EDS,
Yeah.
we're shown the door to recovery, which is exercise, but we're not given the key to unlock
Yes.
the door.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? We always say, it's not, I mean, hands up who enjoys exercise. Do you enjoy exercise now? Like now? Maybe you didn't in the past. Would you say you'd enjoy it now? Yeah. But when you first started doing exercise, did you enjoy it, or was it no? No. Okay. So there's really this mismatch, isn't there? We're told that we have to exercise, which is true. Obviously I'm a firm believer in that. Along with other things, there's never one magic bullet that's going to fix everything. But there's some mismatch, isn't there, as to the type of exercise and the way it's taught that's not happening here by the sounds of it. And obviously we're a very small sample, but it's giving us a good idea of the sorts of things that happen. Okay, so Rachel, let's jump in with you. Again, did you have any sort of we've kind of touched on it, but when you had a poor exercise experience, which I think all of us have had from the sounds of it, how did that make you feel? So you were told to exercise, but then you did it and it didn't work out quite so well. How did you feel then when that happened?
A lot of frustration because, especially before my diagnosis, when I was told to go swimming, go running, I would try to do it. And then I would go one time, like running, and I'll be so sore for a whole week, but I'll keep on trying to push. And I end up feeling like it was my fault. Like I was doing something wrong. It must be something wrong with me. And even with the PT, I felt so pressured. Like this was the way the doctors were telling me. Everybody was saying seemed like the right way. And so that's why I kept on trying it for so long.
Yeah. Okay.
And with my Coccyx injury, that was me doing more hardcore Pilates, like YouTube workouts. And when I hurt myself, that was very devastating, actually, because I had finally felt like I was getting stronger and I was becoming more like my old self. And it all came crashing down and I had to start from square one, it felt like. It was, in hindsight, it was the best thing that could have happened to me because it forced me to really listen to my body and to be more aware of my movements.
Yeah.
But it was definitely hard in the process.
Yes. No. Yeah. No. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing. And Bethany, what about you? So how did you feel if you had sort of a poor exercise experience?
It was very discouraging. When I was last in formal PT, that pre-COVID, the only thing that they were able to really do with me was the aqua therapy. And so every morning at 8 a.m. I'd be in the pool with all these old people, all these people in their 80s, and it was very frustrating to see that like they're doing better than I am. So it would make me feel like there was something wrong with me, or there was something that I was doing wrong. And just incredibly discouraging to be trying to do all the things they wanted me to do, but just continuing to feel like I was getting worse and having more injury and not making any improvement.
Yeah, totally understandable. So very similar experience then with Rachel, frustration, feeling discouraged. Yeah. Okay. And Robin, what about you? Have you had a poor experience, and how did you feel?
Yeah, in general, I really love movement. And so for that to shift from, becoming something that provided joy to something that would provide fear, I think that was more my experience. I started to become afraid of movement, right? That's that boom or bust cycle where it's like, whatever I do, I'm going to end up hurting myself or flared up.
Yes.
And it's not just injuries, right? We're focusing a lot of on the pain, but there's also like, fatigue and things like, since I was a teenager, I would faint after exercise. And again, like the things that I thought were normal are shocking now in retrospect. And so for me, getting past that transition of fear of movement was really important to learn to find things that felt good again. So I wouldn't feel, discouraged as mentioned, but also so that I wouldn't decondition myself through avoidance of any movement. And finding that balance was really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just ask the other two ladies, have you experienced fear of movement as well? Is that, just raise a hand, is that something you've kind of, okay. Yeah, and just out of interest, when you, obviously we're told to exercise, so we do exercise, what's been the thing, would it be the pain or would it be the fatigue, be the thing that kind of stops you exercising? Would it be more your pain? Hands up if it would be pain that stops you kind of wanting to exercise. Okay. And what about, and fatigue? You can have both if it's both. Would it be fatigue as well, or just the pain? So. Yeah.
I think more pain, a little bit fatigue.
Yeah.
Earlier in my journey, it was pain. And now I will never get to the pain levels because the fatigue is more so the limiter.
Okay.
And I think that was after, a couple years of deconditioning. And so I'm kind of slowly trying to get through that.
Yeah. So do we think that the more conditioned we become, we should improve our fatigue levels as well? Do you think? Because we know that conditioned tissue is definitely going to help with pain. We know that. But what about the fatigue? Do you think that being conditioned will help with the fatigue as well, in your experience?
I do. I've seen it improve for myself very gradually. Only if I really, truly don't overdo it. There's this threshold if you get there and you go beyond. Just like pain, there's a point of no return. And so finding where that is.
Yes.
It includes.
You're right. Yeah. And it can be a very narrow sort of transition, isn't it, from one to the other? Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So, Bethany, in terms of your exercise, and I know people who haven't heard Bethany's other podcast, she's got this most amazing list of all her toolkit that she uses to help throughout the day. It's just awesome. But in terms of exercise, what finally, ticked the box? What suddenly slotted into place, and how did you start to move forward? So thinking of now, how far you've come.
So for me, when COVID hit last year, of course, everything got closed, pools and therapy and everything. And I actually stumbled across your program on Facebook when you were offering that course for movement. And I kind of grabbed that as like I can't do anything else anymore. Let's just try. And I started off with it really slowly, just doing a session like once or twice a week. And after doing that for a couple months, I realized that I'm like, okay, I think I might feel a little bit better. So let's go on to the full program and continue that pathway. And just continuing that kind of slow progression, going from, once or twice a week to, a year later, I usually am twice a day. And then now I'm gradually adding more of the strengthening exercises, whereas like last year I could barely do the fatigue and mindfulness ones.
That's awesome.
I agree with Robin that the hardest part is figuring out that fine line of 2 reps is okay, but 3 reps is not okay for all the different movements and all the different joints. And what's helped me for that in particular has been journaling. I started January 1st journaling what exercise I did and how I felt to kind of help me hone in better on what my body needed.
Oh, amazing. Fantastic. And so you've got like a list of all the different exercises and you kind of know what your baseline is for those.
Getting there, yes.
That's brilliant. What a great idea. Fantastic. Okay. And Robin, what kind of was the light bulb moment for you with your exercising?
Gosh, I would say meeting other people my age who have EDS. Absolutely. I went to a meetup in the city and met a good friend, and that made all the difference for me. And also having little exercise study groups, even in the Zebra Club virtually, where we can kind of talk about it afterward, was such a game changer for me, because I learned how other people were pacing and was more comfortable staying in touch with myself, because we were all creative, we were all collectively creating this space, and empathizing with one another. So that was a huge game changer. And the other thing that was probably the most impactful was realizing that if after my physical therapy or after my activity, I would take really purposeful time to feel how my body was feeling and soothe it. Whereas, usually I would do my physical therapy and it'd be like, okay, that's my 30 minutes. I'm going to go to work now, or I'm going to go to, whatever other engagement. Realizing that, like, oh, actually, no, the exercise is just part of it. It's the listening and learning that's equally important. And so after I do anything, as I'm not perfect, but as best I can, I maybe lie down and do a body scan or meditation, or have a cup of tea, and just let my body come back down to equilibrium. And that helps me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say to my clients that part, the lying down at the end, is just as important as the exercise bit, because you need to let your body take on all that information and just let everything settle again, because you kind of stirred things up, you've moved things around, and now we just want to settle. So and it sounds like the support side of things was really, really important for you in helping you sort of rehab or come to terms with this, having people around you that understood what was going on and we were sharing that experience with you.
Absolutely, yes. Definitely for a little bit of commiserating, but also to really intentionally create time and space where we're being ourselves outside of the condition that we have, and we're also cultivating movement practices that we are looking forward to, more so than kind of focusing on the difficulties, but of course holding space for that at the same time. Such a game changer.
Yeah, great. And Rachel, same question for you.
It started changing when I started doing the Zebra Club videos, and just changing my whole mentality toward exercise. I think for us, our journey of exercise is not a sprint, it's more marathon. So, every day you have to just focus on taking one more baby step at a time. And there's that progression of each step leading to good progress toward the end. And it took me a long time to accept that, it's not about doing 3 sets of 10 for each exercise. It's about the quality of the movement. And I realized that if I focus on the quality of the movement, then if I do 2 or 3 reps, that's enough to start initiating change in the tissues. And I had to change how I approach exercise. Like when I go to the mat now, it's not, okay, I'm going to do this exercise and this mechanical. It's more like a movement experience. So I'm feeling my body out and working on my breathing, my proprioception. And another big thing was learning how to let the bigger muscles and the stronger muscles of the body support the weaker ones. For example, like lifting up your arms, letting the back support the arms instead of putting all the strain and tension in my arms. So things like that.
So learning healthy movement patterns, really.
And also, remembering that it takes time, and being patient, and the parts of our body that has been sleeping and not working well, it's going to take time to wake them up and retrain them.
absolutely. Yeah, very well said. And just staying with you, Rachel, could you, if anyone's listening now who is struggling with their exercises or doesn't know where to start, what advice would you give them to help them get going?
To just take it slow, and as long as you're moving forward, even if it's very little, it's like any step forward is progress. And yeah, really listen to your body. And if you're having a bad day, don't push through exercise. Just do gentle movement. And at the same time, if you're feeling bad, don't not move, because you need to mobilize tissues and get the fluids flowing. But just listen to your body. And it seems so simple, like if someone tells you listen to your body, but it's a very delicate balance, and it takes a while to learn.
Oh gosh, it's one of the hardest things. If you're really listening to your body, it's hard. It's really hard. And that's part of what we do, right? We're trying to tune into that and really learn how to listen, rather than maybe our egos or, bulldozing through what's really going on, or pictures of how we think we ought to be, Yeah, very nice. Thank you, Rachel. Bethany, what advice would you give to anyone who's starting out on their exercise program or looking how to start?
I'd say just start with a little bit. Like I said, even if you just do it once a week and do the easy exercises, just a little bit of movement. I think that's when your body starts to realize that actually feels good, and you start to want more. And then you get to where you're like, oh, I can't wait to get home from work so that I can lay down and do a restorative class, because I know it's going to make me feel better.
Amazing.
So I think the other piece of advice, again, echoing Rachel, is you really do have to listen to your body, which is super hard and something I'm still learning, but you have to respect its boundaries. You have to know when it wants you to rest or when it wants you to stop, and not try to push through those pain. And then also, just to remember, I always remind myself that it took me, however many years to get to the point that I'm at. So it may take me that many more years to get strong again, and that's okay. It's okay that the progress is slow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's accepting that, really not having, these high expectations of, well, I should be able to do that, or I used to be able to do that. And all of that tension goes into the body, right? Our thoughts are very, very powerful on what they do to the body. So yeah, I think all of you mentioned sort of acceptance, isn't it? It's accepting.
Yes.
Yeah. No, very nice. Thank you. And Robin, what advice would you give our listeners?
I would say be kind and gentle to yourself throughout the process.
Yeah.
You and your body are working hard. And to do a little bit more on your bad days, like just move a little bit, and do a little bit less on your good days, to kind of find that perfect zone of movement when possible, and play with it. Don't compare yourself to other people and their progress and their journey, even with people who have hypermobility or EDS. We're also different than one another. And so find the movements that feel good to you every day, the things that you can do even on your worst days, and, stick with that, and then try to build that and expand that library over time of things that you really enjoy doing.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Wow. Thank you. I think you've all given some really, really positive advice there. And there's kind of a theme, isn't there? We've got different stories, but we're all kind of saying the same thing. So there has to be something in that. And I think if we had 50 of us here, I think we'd all probably be saying the same things, more or less. So just to finish up then, exercise is a positive experience then. Let's give it a thumbs up if we're now saying exercise is a positive for us. Yes, and exercise is definitely beneficial. I'm not putting words in your mouth, so if you don't agree, just say no. But, you know, would we say that exercise is part of your staple, you know, toolkit? It's something that you need to do and you want to do, importantly. It's not like, oh, I've got to do my exercises. You know, we want to do it. Would we say that?
Yeah, it's actually the favorite part of my day now, even though I was always so apprehensive about it. I guess for me, when I go to exercise, not only am I going to feel better, but it feels like I'm taking back my health one day at a time. Like I know each time I go to the mat, it's going to help in the long run. So
wow, that's
yeah. There's a sense of control that's back a little bit.
Yeah. Yes.
And,
Bethany?
And I would say, go ahead. And I would say that sorry.
That's all right. Don't worry.
I would say that the beauty that the movement therapy gives back is that it finally gives you some hope. Hope that you can do something to get better, that there is a future, that there is something in your power, that there is something that's going to make you feel better and help you be stronger and help you do the things that you want to do. Because I think that's what I didn't have any more hope. All I could see was, you know, 5 years from now, I won't even be able to play with my youngest child on the floor. And, you know, doing the therapy, getting stronger, being able to take that back, it's just, there's no price tag for the amount of hope that gives you.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a lovely thing to say. Awesome. Yeah, really important, isn't it? When you lose, you know, we should always have hope, shouldn't we? And it's so hard sometimes when you've tried, especially when you go to see doctors. Actually, I hear it a lot from clients that, you know, people say, actually, there's nothing we can do to help you. We don't know what to do. I mean, that should never happen, because what do people do then? What on earth do we do? So yeah, no, thank you, Bethany. Robin, did you want to say something?
Oh, I did. I haven't made friends with the word exercise yet myself.
Okay.
But I have with movement.
Yes.
Movement,
okay.
Everything to me. I will always move. And so I just wanted to throw that out there for anybody who might still be in a transition with making friends with exercise or needing to reframe that.
Yes.
I love that Bethany said movement therapy. It's really what it is. It's truly therapeutic. Even if you're just rolling your wrists around, it's moving. And that's what's been beautiful for me. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Because exercise can have, the word itself can have such connotations, can't it? Because it's always something that we're told to do, and there's nothing worse than doing something that you've been told to do. And exercise can be a scary road as well, because we think, oh, I can't exercise, I'm going to hurt myself. But like we say, reframing that, you know, all movement is exercise. You know, playing with your children, gardening, going for a walk, whatever, mopping the floor, it's exercise. And how do we apply that movement therapy into our daily activities so that we don't hurt ourselves doing our daily activities as well? So, you know, I'm a firm believer, exercise doesn't mean that you have to get your mat out and do, you know, whatever. Movement is everything. I totally agree. And it should be, you know, a joyful thing. It's a joy, isn't it, to be able to move and to appreciate everything in life. So fantastic. That's lovely. Oh, you've all said such lovely things, and you know, very, very positive. I hope our listeners, I hope you enjoyed that and got some positive messages, you know, from people living with the same condition as you are, and you know, finding a way forward. They're you know, I'm a firm believer in that. You know, I would never say no to thinking that there's always something we can do, no matter where you are today, whether you're bedbound, whether you're a wheelchair user, or whether, you know, whatever's going on, there is always something. Like Robin said, even if you just start moving the wrists and feeling your body move in a very simple way, that's going to start sending some positive messages. It can be that simple, you know, But brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much to Robin, to Rachel, and to Bethany for sharing their time and their views on exercise and helping us dispel some myths on EDS exercise, and that it can be a positive experience. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and thank you for listening. And until next time, keep moving.